In the late 19th century, bananas were a rare, exotic luxury. But if you walked along the docks of the American South, you would regularly see thousands of perfectly ripe ones being tossed into the harbor. The market was entirely controlled by a single, massive monopoly. That monopoly was the United Fruit Company. They moved staggering volumes of product through American ports every single day, requiring armies of dock workers to manually unload ships arriving from Central America. United Fruit separated incoming inventory into two categories. Green bananas were loaded for long-distance sales, while ripening yellow bananas went to local traders. But a third category, freckled bananas, too ripe for transit, made up 15%. Sam Zemery arrived at these very docks as a 14-year-old Russian immigrant. He had no money, no connections, and spent his days taking whatever odd jobs he could find around the warehouses. But he had a ground-level perspective. While corporate executives sitting in boardrooms saw that third pile of bananas as a logistical liability, Zemery saw an unexploited market gap for lower-income buyers who couldn't afford the premium fruit. He took his entire life savings, a grand total of $50, and offered to buy the rejected pile. United Fruit gladly accepted the deal. From their perspective, a teenager was paying them to remove their garbage. This is the economic principle of arbitrage. Zemery identified a pricing inefficiency inside a dominant player's system and stepped in to turn a corporate write-off into positive capital. Zemery loaded his cheap inventory onto a train, eager to sell it in neighboring towns. But he immediately ran into the reality of 19th century rail travel: endless, unpredictable delays. The trains would grind to a halt for hours at a time, waiting for track clearances or driver changes. He was now fighting a ticking clock. The bananas were already freckled. Sitting idle on a humid railcar for even a few extra hours meant his entire net worth was rapidly turning brown and worthless. Knowing he would never make it to his intended destinations in time, Zemery jumped off the train and walked into a Western Union office. He decided to use the railway's own communication infrastructure to solve his logistical crisis. He wired the local grocers and street vendors at every upcoming stop on the route. He offered them rock-bottom prices for the fruit if they met him directly on the platform, plus a cut of the commission for everything they sold. It worked. By abandoning the slow, centralized distribution model, a lone teenager built a decentralized ad hoc network on the fly. He managed to move a highly perishable product faster than the monopoly ever could. This line graph charts Zemery's exponential revenue growth right alongside the volume of waste he bought from United Fruit. Using his telegraph model, he scaled his operation from a single railcar to millions of dollars in annual sales in just a few years. But he pumped so much cheap, perfectly edible fruit into these local markets that consumers stopped buying the expensive green and yellow bananas. He was actively cannibalizing United Fruit's premium sales. The monopoly retaliated. They intentionally delayed his shipments, cut his daily supply in half, and even began dumping their own cheap fruit into the market at a massive loss, just to bleed his profit margins dry. Exploiting a market loophole works perfectly until the dominant player finally takes notice. To survive a sustained attack from a titan, a disruptor has to stop relying on their competitor for supply and take total ownership of the source material. Zemery left the comfort of the American distribution network. He traveled straight into the jungles of Central America to buy land, intent on directly importing and producing his own bananas. United Fruit executives managed their empire by reading reports in Boston boardrooms. Zemery waded into the mud. He cleared out the jungle, tested the river flows, and worked the harvests alongside his own laborers. In a surprising move, United Fruit actually offered to invest in Zemery's new production venture, taking a 10% stake. They assumed that by holding his purse strings, they could keep their loudest nuisance under control. They miscalculated. Zemery's intimate operational proximity to the physical product gave him a strategic advantage. He understood the exact friction points of the harvest, knowledge that pure financial capital and boardroom oversight could never buy. The banana trade was notoriously volatile. Floods and disease could wipe out a harvest overnight. Because of this, Zemery was heavily in debt. When he found an opportunity to aggressively expand his land holdings, his primary investor and partner flatly refused to take on the risk. Zemery made a lethal wager. With traditional banks shutting him out, he went straight to the criminal underworld, borrowing capital at 50% interest rates to buy out his partner's shares. The gamble paid off. Zemmour now held 90% ownership of a massive, independent production engine. United Fruit had lost their veto power. True market dominance requires moving past the hustle of arbitrage into absolute ownership of production. The penniless boy who started his career trading corporate waste had built a capitalist engine powerful enough to reshape the map of Central America.